Oh, Minna, you are muted.
There we go.
There you go.
Yeah, awesome. I am super jazzed to be here. This is one of my favorite topics. I wrote a book about confidence called The Confident Body, because I feel so passionate about it. And I'm going to share with you maybe some new novel ways to consider what confidence means, how to sort of activate and practice confidence. Um, and it's going to be a real sort of blip, but hopefully it will expose you to some new ideas to start exploring and playing around with. So I'll give you a little bit of background on my company. So Energize Your Voice, we sort of empower visionary leaders and teams through play. So our whole thing is how do we, let's take the lens of public speaking. Instead of saying, okay, we're going to give you public speaking fundamentals, we are going to give you that and create world-class public speakers. So when we think about what do I do with my hands in moments of presentation, I say, I don't care, but let's give you the tools so that your hands come to life. We don't think about what to do with them. We want to give them the opportunity to come to life on their own. And so it's really a sort of inside out approach of this intrinsic motivation, this idea of connecting to your intuition, really leaning into what I call the spark of yes. And how do we not only cultivate that in our leadership, this opportunity to fail and take risks and be vulnerable and show up authentically? How do we cultivate that in our leaders? And then how do we really foster that in our team dynamics? And that all comes to life through play. So that's really what my company is about. It's how we work with global brands. And we've been really fortunate to work with some of sort of the top brands like TikTok and Uber, and Red Bull and some major financial institutions. But really, this is my happy place. This is where I really come to life, is when I get to speak to individuals, contributors who have a sort of a heart-centered approach, who want to become agents of change, who really believe in the power of leadership to transform systems for the better. And I believe confidence is really central to that intention. So you can pop into the chat. You can just sort of think, reflect on your own here. But I'm really curious what we think we mean by confidence. What does confidence mean? I literally wrote a book because we have not defined this effectively as a culture. It's something we continuously encourage one another to pursue. Just be confident. Oh my God, go up there and just be confident. But we don't break down what that means. We might even conceptually or theoretically have an idea of what that means. But when it comes to putting it into practice, when it comes to practicing it, what does that look like? How can we think about it from a functional perspective? So it's really what I want to dive into today. We're going to go in an overview of confidence. We're going to maybe talk about what some of our blockers are. And then I'm going to give you two really simple tools to start exploring confidence on your own. And they might surprise you in terms of what those tools are. So let's go ahead and get into it. So this is a big quote. That's why I put it on a slide here. But in my estimation, when it comes to thinking about cultivating confidence, I think no one says it better than Joseph Campbell. So I'm going to read this quote to you, and then we're going to reflect this on sort of how we show up as leaders, how we show up in our own lives and our relationships, etc. Our task, therefore, is to communicate directly from one inward world to another in such a way that an actual shock of experience will have been rendered. Not a mere statement for the information or persuasion of a brain, but an effective communication across the void of space and time from one center of consciousness to another. I want you to really think about what this experience is like. And I want to put you on the receiving end here for a moment. So I want you to think about the experience of receiving communication that feels like this. Those moments when you leave an interaction ignited. Those moments when you leave an interaction and you almost have like a residue of inspiration. where you're feeling creatively alive or deeply connected, or you've given permission to show up in a way that feels so genuine and so outside of how you typically think certain interaction should go that you leave surprised and transformed. We've been in those moments. Now think about when you've shown up in those moments, when you have held such clear intention around how you're pursuing a moment with purpose, with intentionality, with clarity, with certainty. And certainty does not have to be predetermined. It can be that spark of yes, that moment of intuition, that essential truth that just sort of flows from us. When we feel so connected to that, and we feel so connected to the person that we're sharing with because we have such a desire to be heard, that level of intentionality, or that level of openness to receive that level of intentionality, that is how we now create a shock of experience. When it comes to confident communication, this is not about saying the right thing. It actually has very little to do with what you say. There's a statistic where only 7% of the information that we communicate is verbal, 93% is nonverbal. What Joseph Campbell is expressing here is that nonverbal intangibility of connection. Because words meet the mind, voice meets the body. The body is how we feel things, and when we feel things, we remember. So when we're showing up in moments of leadership, that's really how we want to start conceiving of the way that we're behaving. Great, Minna, sounds good. How do we do that? Oh my God, I'm so glad you asked. So here's how I define confidence. This is really how I break it down in my book. This is how I sort of structure a lot of our trainings, is around these 4 key principles. So if we take that quote from Joseph Campbell, and we really now place that into a realm of behavior. So if that experience is the outcome, what are the behaviors that allow us to embody to such a degree that we create that outcome? That is a space of confidence. So those behaviors are what we see here. Confidence is not something you are. It is something that's perceived by others. And that is really where we have sort of mixed things up socially and culturally in terms of how we're defining this. We say be confident, which immediately places an archetype of expectation on the outcome in terms of what we're presenting. And that usually falls somewhere in the category of white dominant male. What we do if we now instead say this is not the outcome, or this is what a confident person looks like, but rather these are the behaviors that give the impression of confidence or perception of confidence, we can now democratize what confidence actually looks like, because it will be a reflection of these behaviors if they're embodied authentically. So now when you say, I want to feel confident, or I want to be confident, you can check yourself in these 4 things. So here's what that looks like. And we can reflect this on any sort of leadership that we trust, any relationship that we trust, when we feel like we're speaking authentically, when we are called to rise to the occasion and maybe are fumbling our way through, sort of feeling like we can really ignite ourselves into that moment effectively. Here's what we want to really consider wisely. When we experience a confident person, one of the things we see is a body free of tension. That does not mean a disengaged body. That does not mean a body that's not active and expressive. It means a body that is available to movement without a consistent need to move. So it's a body that is prepared. It's a body that's released. It's not a body that's relaxed. It's an active engagement free of tension. So non-functional tension, meaning, is my belly released? There is a huge habit that's created around tensing the belly, which limits the breathing? Are my shoulders tight? Am I feeling tension in my jaw? Are my toes clenched? A body that's free of tension, it's at ease. Speaking should be as easy as breathing. And confident communication will come from a body that is easy. Which brings us to that next point, which is connection to deep and easy breathing. That means in my body that's free of tension, my breath now has access to the lower parts of myself. If I'm only breathing into my chest, and we can think about our torso almost as a barrel. So I have my top quadrant, my middle, or my top tier, my middle tier, and my bottom tier. My top tier is going to be my chest. If I'm only breathing into my chest, that activates our sympathetic nervous system, our fight, flight, freeze response. So it holds us in this space of adrenaline-fueled tension. And it shifts everything into rational versus emotional or intentional. Middle quadrant, so ribs, that's we want to sort of gain access there. We want our ribs to feel like they can move in response to our breath. Our body knows how to breathe itself, but we tend to invite even tension into that process. So we want it to feel easy in the middle, and then ultimately we want it to reach that bottom layer. We want to be able to breathe into the pelvic floor, breathe into that root chakra. That's where lives our need to speak. When we really feel a sincere desire to speak up, share our voice, contribute, advocate, set boundaries, whatever it is, get creative. When we have those moments, that doesn't come from here. That comes from the depths of us. And the only way we can gain access to that level of truth-telling is to have that body that's free of tension and then give our breath access to that space. What will then extend from that, right? All of that is a thought and a feeling. All of those things are thoughts and feelings. But ultimately, we want to express ourselves, right? If we put this into practical application, how do we now share our voice? So a voice that is free and expressive is going to be sort of that third extension. Breath is the fuel for voice. We can also think, rather than we don't create voice, we actually create vibration. Voice is what we hear. Vibration is what we create. Now, if we pair that into this sort of similar analogy as an instrument, if an instrument is open and well-tuned, then the vibration that extends from that instrument will be beautiful and resonant and easy to receive. That is the type of voice that we want to feel like we are creating, this sense of really resonant vibration. The only way we can do that is if our body is free of tension, if we are connected to breathing. Breath is the fuel for voice. If we're just creating voice without proper breath support, we're actually just making noise because it will be void of vibration. And vibration is what can ultimately penetrate your listener. That is what crosses that void of space and time. Vibration carried on the breath, coming from a body that is free of tension. And we can already perceive that, right? From, again, going back to sort of putting yourself in the witnessing presence of somebody who embodies this. All of a sudden now we're like, wow, that felt good. That just felt good. I felt at ease in the presence of that person. Now, arrogance and confidence are pesky neighbors. So sometimes we think we are experiencing confidence, but really we are experiencing arrogance. And that's when maybe we felt persuaded, but we don't feel good about it. Or we feel a little bit incomplete after that moment has passed, or maybe uncertain, or maybe manipulated. And so these confident behaviors will always elicit trust because they will be stemmed from truth. Because our body will have accessed that most essential space of truth telling in that pelvic floor area. Now, this is all well and good. So I got a body that's free of tension. I got my breath that's really gaining access there. My voice is resonant and vibrant and expressive, meaning also I have the opportunity to move through all the different places of my voice. So I can play the music of my thoughts, which brings me to how now we bring that all to life is through the action of play. Play in its simplest form is the intangible space of unpredictability and aliveness. This means those spaces where we don't know what's going to happen, but we're riding the wave. We're sitting on the precipice of certainty and uncertainty. We have the moment to jump off and say yes, that threshold of choice where we say okay, or we retreat and we're like, not now. Play is what gives us the opportunity to say yes and lower the stakes on the outcome or risk of that decision. Play is about listening and responding. It's about strategic decision making. It's hypothesis in action. It's really leaning into the vulnerability of not knowing with the commitment to pursue in spite of. It is distinctly vulnerable if the game is played completely. If you commit to play, it will feel scary. What will come out of that, however, is such a deep alignment to what it is you're saying, and the connection that people have to you will be increased in terms of your influence, persuasion. We also want to think about play. It is strategic. So this is not unencumbered play. Of course, I encourage that. I encourage you to see what your voice can do, right? I encourage you to like kind of play around with what's possible in terms of expression, physical expression. How big can I get? Or maybe I'm an introvert and that just feels really awkward for me. So maybe I just, hum in my own time, right? Whatever it is, I encourage this sort of unencumbered play, unapplied play. But then when we get into those moments when that feel consequential, we can play on purpose. So if we are in a negotiation moment, instead of thinking about it like, I hope I really win. Oh my gosh, I hope that they accept my offer. I'm going to be prepared for a fight, right? It's like, how can I really be open to receive? How can I then be mindful and conscious of what escapes my mouth so that maybe my tone implies a tactic that will get them more aligned to what it is that I desire? So anything up to this point is a thought and a feeling. And as soon as it escapes the mouth, it now becomes concrete. We can play in that moment, that threshold of choice. We can make decisions around what comes out of our mouth. But it all starts with having a body that's free of tension, connecting deeply to our breath, allowing our voice to be fully expressive. So then when we give it the action of aliveness through play, everything is working in unison. Now that's all well and good, but there's something that's standing in our way. So Patsy Rodenberg, who's one of sort of the premier vocal coaches in the world, she has written a ton of books. This quote specifically is from her book, The Right to Speak. Here's what happens. So all of those behaviors of confidence that we just looked at, we are born that way. We are born fully free in our body. We are born fully connected to our breathing. We are born fully expressive in our voice. And holy buckets, isn't the first thing we learn how to do is play? But then over the course of our life, stuff happens. We become self-aware. We become self-conscious. We understand the notion of consequence. We have relationships that feel meaningful and we want to do well. We also want to adhere to social norms. And so Patsy Rodenberg says here, gradually these habits, and let's say these habits like diminishing our vocal presence, not speaking up when we want to, second guessing ourselves when our intuition is telling us something's not quite right or something's really right, but we don't know how to express ourselves. Gradually, these habits, which we take to be natural, oh, I'm just an introvert. Oh, I'm just shy. Oh, that's not really something I do. Oh, that's just me. My voice is just that way. We take them to be natural to us, they enslave us. They limit us in the ways in which we feel empowered to show up in critical and important spaces. We become restricted in what we can say and how we can say it. And it's largely unconscious. This is the challenge. These habits that we develop, these limiting habits of expression, these confident behaviors that we sort of diminish, control, and compromise, start from the moment things feel consequential. We develop body habits. We develop ineffective functional use, voice, body, breathing. So much so that we don't even think about it. They feel natural. We're enslaved by them. And so then how do we go about shifting out of habits that are unconscious? That's what we're getting at today, right? So first of all, I want you to take an observant lens, an objective observant lens for yourself. And I want you to think about, how does my body show up in critical and important spaces or moments when I'm called to rise to the occasion? How does my body show up there? Is it tense? Is it retracted? Is it overcompensating? Is it disengaged? Or is it free of tension, alive and present? Where do I feel my breath have access or lack access? Do I feel like my voice is freely flowing from me, or do I feel like it's an effort to express, or maybe I'm overcompensate in my volume? And am I playing? Am I really present in this space of unpredictability and aliveness? We can just start doing an objective assessment. And then here are the two key things I want you to consider to put it into practice. Super simple. We are going to listen and respond. This is what play is. It's listening, responding, right? It's like input, output. That's what breath is. Inhale to inspire, exhale to express. It's all about this cycle. Even non-verbally, we can listen and respond. So at the core, that's what we're going to focus on. How do I really listen? And I know there's a session coming up on that as well, so highly encourage you to go check that out. How do we really listen? And then how do we, through these behaviors of confidence, respond in ways that feel authentic and aligned on what our intention is? But really simplistically, I want to think about these two key things. So one, listen. This might feel counterintuitive, but in order to listen, you have to breathe. If you're not sure how to breathe, I want you to breathe into your butt. That's what I tell everyone. Actually, I say asshole, but we're gonna say butt for today's purposes. Breathe into your butt. And I mean that in the most literal, functional sense. I want you to feel the anus expand with your breath. I want you to feel the breath gain access into the pelvic floor. I want you to feel the breath moving into that lower back space, that sacrum space. Breathe into your butt. So as you're listening, you actually want to have about 80% of your focus on sort of the action that's outside of you, and 20% is on your breathing. 0% is on what you're going to say next. Yes, all the information you need to know how to engage in your circumstances is outside of you. The only thing you need to do and to be able to engage in that effectively is to listen and breathe. The only way you can listen is to breathe. So breathe into your butt. As you're thinking about active listening, it's not about like demonstrating. That's a component of it, of course, but breathing is going to be at the core of this. And then how do we ultimately respond if we're not worried about saying the right things? So there are going to be two key things I want you to think about here. In the response, I mentioned it before, we're going to play the music of our thoughts. This is where we can really think about this threshold of choice. Nothing that escapes your mouth should feel accidental. This is where mindfulness comes in. This is where consciousness of the functionality of confidence comes in. Anything up to this point, thought or feeling, ooh, I feel a certain way, even if I'm like, let's say I'm like really mad. Let's say somebody said something and I'm just like, I feel really irritated. I can't believe I said that again. This person's so annoying, right? Whatever it is, like we all have those thoughts. Fine, that is valid and valuable. Feel your feelings, do that. But guess what? As soon as it escapes your mouth, you better know exactly what you intend when it moves across that threshold. So if you're like, so annoying, Tom, how dare you do that? But then you'd be like, hey, Tom. So you can play the music of your thoughts by communicating through tone, pace, tempo, articulation. You can use all of these tools like an instrument to play the music of your thoughts. And that can be a deeply intentional way to respond strategically. The second thing here is yes and. Do not underestimate the importance of starting a thought with yes and. I don't care if someone's like, hey, would you like me to bag your groceries? Yeah, and I appreciate that. Today I brought my own bag. It doesn't matter if you're like, no, I don't. How do we use yes and? If I'm in a meeting and someone says, hey, Minna, do you have anything to contribute to that? Yeah, and I think what Sarah said was really important. And I think we should all go down that line of thinking a bit more. I added nothing to that thought, but I used yes and to catapult me into the conversation. What that does are three key things. It acknowledges what was just said, so it forces you to listen, because I can't listen or I can't acknowledge if I haven't paid attention. And attention is a practice. So I'm going to acknowledge what was just said, and then I'm going to elevate it, right? So yes, and then I'm going to advance it forward. So acknowledge, elevate, advance. So yes, I heard you, and I'm going to add on to that, and then I'm going to advance it through my own contribution. So it gives you a really simple framework to know how to verbally engage in a scenario. All this will be effective and honestly pretty easy if we go back to those behaviors of confidence. So when you're thinking about confidence, I want to move out of the realm of theory. I want to put it in the landscape of functional practice. And then I want to bring it to life through play, specifically by embodying these practices. These are something you can do as soon as we get off this meeting and put and implement immediately today. You can think about breathing into your butt when you're trying to listen instead of thinking about here. So that 80-20 rule. And when you respond, I want you to think about tone, articulation, pacing. That's going to be playing the music of your thoughts and then initiating your verbal response with a yes and. So those are your tools. That's confident communication. Most importantly, we're going to stay human, guys. We are just people making our way through this messy business of life, and everybody is just doing their best. No one is rooting for you to fail. So lean into your humanity. We yearn for it. We think we have to live in this landscape of perfection. People don't pay to see perfect. They want to see your humanity come to life. Play is what will activate that for you. And behind the scenes are going to be those confident behaviors. So thank you so much. I will now open it up to questions and stop sharing my screen.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Minna. I saw some head nods for people whose cameras were on, and I always learn something new. I've read your book and I always learn something new anyway. So I am so grateful that you were able to join us. For those people who are tuning into the recording, what's the best way for people to contact you or reach you if they want to follow up?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you can either connect with me on LinkedIn, is always a great space. I'm an active LinkedIn user. I know, Marissa, you are as well. I don't think about that as a passive network. So I really, please reach out to me. I always say, use me, don't abuse me, but use me. So reach out to me there if you have questions in terms of how to apply this. Instagram is also great. And then I'm going to really encourage people to buy the book. Go, and it's on Amazon. It's like a low stakes way to start exploring this stuff in your own time, at your own pace. The Confident Body, a functional approach to unlocking your full potential. You can get it on Amazon. It's also available at Barnes and Noble in an ebook version. And I would love to hear from you.
Amazing. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in.